The power of one step inside every story of justice begins with a choice, not the courtroom kind, not a jury's decision or a judge's ruling, but the simple, brave decision to step forward, even when everything and everyone silently tells you not to. This isn't just a speech about law, it's a story about resilience wrapped in a red coat, about how one woman walked through the front doors of a courthouse not to fight, but simply to be seen, heard, and respected. It begins with Ava Dorsey clutching her grandmother's legacy in one hand and her dignity in the other, stepping into a system that was never designed to welcome her. But what happened inside those walls didn't just change her story. It cracked open something much bigger, and by the time it ends you'll realize it never really was about paperwork. It was about presence, and that moment she walked through the doors at exactly 1:27 p.m. That was the moment everything changed. The woman with the red coat and a deadline. The courthouse clock struck 1:27 p.m. when Ava Dorsey stepped through the front doors. The sound of her heels echoed off the marble floors like a drumbeat of urgency. Her long red coat swayed behind her, and her brown leather satchel was packed with documents she had triple-checked that morning. To every passerby, she looked calm, posed, but inside her chest a storm raged. This wasn't just a paperwork errand. This was her grandmother's legacy. Her childhood home, now hers by inheritance, was under threat. A disputed zoning violation had placed her property on a list for city seizure. It was a clerical mistake, one she had proof to correct, but only if she filed her appeal today, by 2 p.m. sharp. If she missed the window, the city's bulldozers would roll in and nothing would stop them. The air inside the courthouse was sterile and cold, yet Ava moved with quiet resolve. Security scanned her bag. She signed in with her ID. Everything was by the book. As she passed through the metal detector, she exhaled slowly. Almost there, she turned left toward the civil filings window, where a single glass counter stood between her and justice. Behind it, she saw the figure of a woman she didn't know yet, but would never forget. "You're trespassing." Beatrice Langley looked up from her monitor, eyes scanning Ava like she was an unexpected stain on a clean tablecloth. Ava offered a polite smile and stepped forward. "Good afternoon. I'm here to file an appeal before the 2 p.m. deadline regarding a property zoning issue. I've got all the required documentation." She began to slide the packet through the window tray. Langley didn't touch it. Her lips thinned into a line of disapproval. "You're not on the docket," she said coldly. Ava blinked. "I wasn't scheduled for a hearing, just a document filing." "I was told I could submit it directly to this window before 2. Langley's eyes narrowed. "That's not how this works." She reached under the desk and pressed a red button without breaking eye contact. Ava noticed. "Excuse me." "Why are you? You can't be here," Langley interrupted, louder now. "You are not authorized to be in this area. You're trespassing." The word landed like a slap. Ava's mouth opened in disbelief. "Ma'am, I entered through security." "I signed the visitor log. This is a public courthouse. I have every legal right to." "I said what I said." Langley snapped, turning to the 2 deputies now approaching from the hallway. "Officers, remove her." "She's trespassing." The deputies looked confused. Ava held out her documents and explained again, voice trembling but clear. She wasn't causing a scene. She was simply trying to follow the law, but the air was heavy with something more than misunderstanding. It was a power play, a silent threat. Ava felt it like a chill on her spine. She wasn't just being told she didn't belong there. She was being targeted, for reasons unspoken but deeply felt, and yet she stood her ground because Ava knew when power tests your presence, you don't back down. You anchor deeper. Deputies approaching. Tension sharpens as the word trespassing echoed down the sterile courthouse corridor. 2 uniformed deputies appeared from the far end of the hall. Their boots struck the marble with precision, each step tightening the grip of tension coiling around Ava. Officer Rayburn, tall with tired eyes and a slow, cautious walk, led the approach. Beside him, Officer Martinez, younger and built like a wall, rested his hand casually on his belt, not aggressive but alert. Ava could feel the heat rising on her skin as their shadows reached her before their voices did. Beatrice Langley stood behind her, glass like a judge handing down a sentence. "That's her," she declared, pointing a perfectly manicured finger at Ava. "She refused to leave when I told her she wasn't authorized to be here. She's trespassing." Ava turned to the officers, her voice steady but lined with urgency. "Sir, ma'am, please. I have official documents to file. Today is the final day. I've been through security, signed in properly, and I followed every legal step to get here." "This is about a zoning appeal." Rayburn raised a hand gently, signaling her to pause. "Let me see those papers." With slow, deliberate care, Ava reached into her satchel, announcing each movement like it might be misinterpreted, and handed over the packet of documents. Officer Rayburn flipped through them in silence, his brows furrowing, lips pressing tight. Martinez watched Ava closely, but his posture had shifted, less tense, more uncertain. Rayburn glanced up at Langley. "Ma'am, these papers look legit." "She's here for a time. Sensitive property appeal, not causing any disturbance that I can see." Langley's eyes flared with indignation. "She doesn't have an appointment. She's not on the day's docket. I don't care what those papers say. She's not supposed to be here." Ava looked between them all, her chest rising and falling slowly. Everything in her life hinged on this moment, on whether protocol would bow to prejudice. Paperwork vs. Power Officer Rayburn held the documents like they weighed more than paper. Inside was every shred of evidence Ava needed: photographs, property deeds, notarized letters. She had spent weeks compiling this file. She had done everything right. Yet here she stood, being told she didn't belong. Not because of procedure, but because of perception. Rayburn turned back to her. "Ma'am," he said, voice low, "your paperwork is in order. It's clear why you're here." Relief flickered in Ava's eyes, but only briefly. Langley stepped forward, her voice cutting through the air like a blade. "Are you seriously considering letting her just stay? After I told you she's unauthorized?" Rayburn hesitated. "I've been working this courthouse for 12 years, Langley hissed. "I know how these rules work better than you ever will." Ava couldn't help but notice how her tone had shifted. Her voice, once polite and proper, now revealed something beneath, something sharp and ancient. "Authority misused." Rayburn turned to Martinez, who shrugged and looked toward Ava. "She's not violating any laws," the younger deputy said carefully, "and if she's being truthful, and it looks like she is, it's not trespassing." Rayburn nodded slowly and handed Ava her documents back. "You're within your rights, ma'am. You have business here, and you're not causing a disruption. I'm not removing you." Langley gasped. "This is insubordination. You're ignoring a directive from court administration." Rayburn didn't flinch. "With all due respect, MS. Langley, a directive doesn't override someone's civil rights." The hallway fell silent. The power shift was subtle, but it was happening. Ava stood her ground, breathing deeply, gripping the edges of her appeal like it was a lifeline. In that moment, she knew the truth. Sometimes justice doesn't roar. Sometimes it whispers through the cracks in a broken system, hoping someone will listen. She had no idea someone else was listening. Just steps away, and he was about to change everything. Power tightens its grip. The whole way grew tense, thick with unspoken truths. Even after the deputy refused to remove Ava, Beatrice Langley wasn't backing down. Her lips twisted with quiet fury, a woman so used to unquestioned control that resistance now felt like a personal insult. She leaned toward the glass, her voice low and sharp. "Don't think for a second that waving paper makes you important. You think this system works for people like you. It doesn't." Ava's eyes widened, not out of fear, but recognition. She had heard that tone before, in city meetings, in real estate offices, in whispers at the back of courtrooms. It was the same voice that smiled while blocking your path, that wore professionalism like a mask, hiding bias beneath. "Bureaucracy? I'm going to have your documents shredded." Langley continued, tapping a stack of unrelated files beside her. "Even if you hand them over, I'll mark them late. And once that clock hits 2, your grandmother's land is gone." Officer Rayburn opened his mouth, but stopped. His authority in that building only went so far. This wasn't a fight about law anymore. It was a chess match of internal power, of whispers in back offices, of who got to decide who belonged. Ava felt it all, the eyes watching from benches, the sideways glances from assistants across the hallway. Some looked away, some looked down, no one stepped in. It was as if the very building was holding its breath, waiting to see what she would do next. But Ava didn't yell. She didn't bleed. She straightened her spine. With the eyes of injustice burning into her back, she simply said, "I'm not leaving." And at that moment, fate began turning the key to the next door. The voice from the shadows, a low, steady voice, cut through the hallway like a scalpel. "I'd advise you to reconsider that threat, MS." Langley. Everyone froze, heads turned toward the back of the corridor, where a figure stepped from the shadows beyond the pillar near the elevator. Calm, collected, and unmistakably authoritative, he wore a tailored charcoal suit, the kind that whispered prestige. Around his neck hung a visitor badge, but not the paper kind most people wore. This one gleamed gold. Beatrice Langley's face went pale. The man walked forward slowly, like he was used to taking his time and having people wait for him to speak. "I was upstairs meeting with Chief Justice Burnham," he said, adjusting his cufflink. "I came down early and caught the last few minutes of this interaction." Langley's jaw clenched. "And who exactly are you two?" He smiled, a cold, knowing smile. "I'm Judge Terence Caldwell, U.S. Court of Appeals." A collective breath left the hallway like a gust of wind had passed through. Officer Rayburn stepped back instinctively, nodding in recognition. Martinez whispered, "That's a federal judge." Ava stood frozen, not in fear, but in disbelief. Judge Caldwell. The name echoed from her childhood. Her mother had studied under him. She used to quote him when helping Ava with her school essays. He was a quiet legend among civil rights attorneys, known for his sharp mind and sharper sense of justice. Langley tried to recover. Judge Caldwell, with respect. "This is a local administrative matter. I saw enough." He interrupted, his voice calm but razor sharp. "This woman followed procedure. I watched her enter the building. I watched her speak to you, and I watched you attempt to weaponize your position against her. That's not administration, that's abuse." A hush fell again. He turned to Ava and offered the smallest nod of respect. "You're not alone anymore, MS Dorsey." Then, addressing the deputies, he said clearly, "This woman is not trespassing. She is a citizen lawfully engaging in the judicial process. I want her documents escorted to civil filing personally and time-stamped now." Langley stood speechless, her lips parted, but no words came. Judge Caldwell turned once more to her. "And as for you, MS Langley," he paused, letting the weight of the moment settle, "I believe we'll be reviewing your conduct with the Ethics Committee. I'd recommend gathering your things." And just like that, the chessboard flipped. The power Langley once clutched so tightly dissolved before her eyes. Ava didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She simply stepped forward, her appeal in hand, and for the first time that day, no one stood in her way. Judge Caldwell takes the stand. The hallway, once thick with tension and silent complicity, now echoed with the crisp authority of Judge Terence Caldwell. The same woman who'd been called a trespasser minutes ago was now being personally escorted. By order of a federal judge, Officer Rayburn stepped beside Ava, his entire demeanor transformed. What had been cautious neutrality now shifted into something closer to professional reverence. "I'll take those, ma'am," he said, carefully taking Ava's appeal documents. "We'll make sure these get properly stamped and filed." But Judge Caldwell wasn't finished. He turned back to the small crowd of courthouse staff, officers, and onlookers. "This isn't just about one incident," he said, his voice calm but thunderous. "This is about a pattern. I've received multiple quiet complaints over the past year, emails, calls, even anonymous letters, alleging misconduct, procedural manipulation, and intimidation tactics by certain courthouse personnel." All eyes flicked toward Langley. She tried to retreat behind the glass, behind the fake comfort of her desk, but she was exposed now. The mask of professionalism had cracked, and what lay beneath was visible to all. "I've stayed quiet," Caldwell continued, hoping the system would correct itself. "But what I witnessed today confirms what others have whispered." Then he said the words that made the entire hallway still. "This woman a mess. Ava Dorsey is not just a petitioner. She's a witness now." Langley visibly flinched. Caldwell walked toward the filing window, stepping into the heart of the system like a surgeon walking into an operating room. He placed a card on the counter, an official seal embossed in gold. "This," he said, pointing at Ava's file, "is now part of a formal complaint and ethics investigation. I'll be personally reviewing every appeal denied in this office over the past 2 years, every late filing, every lost document, every case where bias may have played a role." His tone didn't rise. He didn't need to shout. His presence alone tilted the axis of the courthouse. Ava watched all of it unfold, her hands trembling, not with fear, but with the weight of vindication. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about every person who had ever been silenced by red tape and fake smiles. And now someone in power had finally chosen to listen. The fall of Beatrice Langley stood frozen in her booth, her world unraveling around her like paper soaked in ink. She had been untouchable for years, hidden behind a desk, cloaked in routine, empowered by silence. She knew how to deny without explanation. She knew how to make a file disappear, how to roll her eyes in a meeting and call it just policy. She knew how to use the system like a scalpel, and how to make the wounds invisible, but she hadn't expected someone like Judge Caldwell to come down those stairs. She hadn't expected Ava Dorsey to stay calm under pressure. She hadn't expected truth to walk into the room like a wildfire in a red coat. Officer Martinez received a quiet radio call. He stepped forward and addressed Langley flatly. "Ma'am, you're being placed on immediate administrative leave pending internal review. You'll need to step away from your workstation." Langley's face twisted. "You're making a mistake. This woman came in here with an attitude." "She provoked me." Judge Caldwell raised an eyebrow. "Is that your final defense?" "Silence. I thought so," he replied. Martinez opened the small gate behind the counter and escorted Langley out, not in handcuffs, not with spectacle, but with the quiet finality of a queen being removed from the board. As she passed Ava, their eyes met for one fleeting second. No words, just the hollow gaze of someone who had lost the game she thought she'd already won. When Langley disappeared around the corner, the silence that followed felt different. Not the silence of fear, but the silence that comes right before a storm clears. Judge Caldwell turned to Ava once more. "You did the right thing," he said simply. "You showed restraint where others would have shouted. And now your voice will go farther than you imagined." Ava nodded slowly, still overwhelmed, still steady, because for the first time in that courthouse, maybe in a very long time, justice hadn't just been written, it had been seen. From viral moment to national spotlight, the courthouse incident, captured partially on security cameras and cell phones by silent witnesses, didn't stay quiet for long. By that evening, Ava Dorsey's name was trending. A 12-second clip of her standing firm in her red coat while Langley called her a trespasser hit the internet. Within hours, it was dissected by legal analysts, civil rights activists, and everyday people alike. But it was what came next that truly ignited the fire. A grainy but powerful video of Judge Caldwell stepping out of the shadows, calmly dismantling Langley's authority with just a few sentences. The hashtags started trending. #Justice for Ava, #Courtroom Courage, #Redcoat Revolt. The public didn't just rally behind the facts. They rallied behind the feeling the moment gave them. That feeling of watching justice show up not in chaos, but in clarity. News anchors praised Ava's composure. Commentators pointed out how rare it was to see power held accountable in real time. Late-night hosts made it a symbol of resistance with grace. Suddenly, Ava's inbox was full. Interviews, legal panels, social justice organizations asking her to speak. But Ava didn't seek the spotlight. Instead, she used it as a mirror. In every interview, she redirected praise to the quiet voices no one had listened to before. The tenants evicted because their filings got lost. The elderly women turned away for using the wrong form. The immigrants intimidated with threats of procedure. She recommended 3 black law students from underfunded schools to take her place on a justice reform panel she was offered. She said, "The next wave of justice doesn't need another spokesperson. It needs more soldiers in the trenches." What started as an act of survival became a movement. A door closed, a legacy opened 3 weeks after that fateful Tuesday. Ava returned to the courthouse, this time through the same doors, wearing the same red coat. But the energy was different. There were no sideways glances, no hushed murmurs. The same clerks who once looked past her now nodded with quiet respect. A new woman had replaced Langley behind the civil filings counter. She smiled, genuinely. Officer Rayburn spotted Ava and tipped his head. "Ms. Dorsey, your appeal was reviewed. City Council reversed the zoning violation. Your grandmother's property is safe." Ava exhaled, almost not believing it. "Thank you," she whispered, but just as she turned to leave, Judge Caldwell appeared once more, this time with a different energy, warm, inviting. He approached her slowly. "You came back." "I had to," Ava replied. "I needed to see it through." Caldwell nodded. We're drafting new procedures for civil filings, tighter oversight, better complaint channels. We couldn't have done it without your case. Ava smiled faintly, then paused. You know, it started with her calling me a trespasser. But I didn't walk into that courthouse to trespass. I walked in to belong. Caldwell looked her in the eye, and now no one will forget that you did. As she stepped outside, Ava glanced back at the building, the cold stone structure that once tried to push her out. Now it stood behind her not as a wall, but as a witness. The story didn't end with Ava. It began with her, because for every system that tries to silence the unheard, there will always be someone who refuses to walk away quietly, and sometimes they wear red. The day she refused to leave, so what began with a woman stepping quietly into a courthouse ended with an entire system. Forced to look itself in the mirror, Ava Dorsey didn't yell, she didn't break down, she stood her ground, and in doing so, she shook the pillars of power just by refusing to back away. She was called a trespasser, but in truth, she was the only one who belonged in that moment, and now her story doesn't sit on a shelf or fade into courtroom silence. It lives on, in new policies, in law students she inspired, and in every person who ever hesitated before walking through doors they were told weren't meant for them. Because justice doesn't always come in gavels and verdicts. Sometimes it comes in footsteps, courage, and a red coat.